There's a specific type of stock that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. And I've watched it eat smart people alive for my entire 20 years in finance. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, people who did everything right, earning more money than they ever dreamed of. And then they go to sleep with the same money fear they had at 25. All of those years across the table from them, I finally figured out the pattern. And I'm going to share the specific calculation, the people who actually broke out of it and ran. It's the math that nobody teaches, and it's coming. It's a pattern that has almost nothing to do with how much money they make, or how smart they are, or how hard they worked. It's a pattern in how their brain processes the math. It's the financial psychology. And once you can see it, you can't unsee it. I've talked about my dad on here before, 40 years at one company. The cost of staying in the rat race long after the rat race had broken all of its promises. If you missed it, it's right here. But you don't have to have watched that for this to land. Because what I'm about to tell you is the mechanism behind everything I saw in him and in thousands of others. Now, I spent 20 years watching this play out, but I'm also the guy who reads everything I can on why people do what they do with their money. And there are three voices in particular that kept naming the pieces of what I was watching, each from a completely different angle. One, Morgan Housel. He wrote The Psychology of Money. His core insight reframed personal finance for an entire generation. Wealth is what you don't see. It's the cars you don't buy. It's the vacations you don't take. It's the lifestyle you didn't upgrade to. He understood that personal finance is more personal than it is the finance. Daniel Kahneman. He helped build the foundation of behavioral finance. He showed that the human brain runs predictable errors when it processes money decisions. Not because people are bad with money, because the brain wasn't designed for spreadsheets. It was designed for survival. And then there's Mel Robbins. She gave millions of people a practical language for the gap between knowing and doing. From the 5-second rule to her let them theory, her whole body of work names the moment when you know exactly what you need to do, but your body still won't let you. That's emotional avoidance. Each of them got something right. Housel changed how a generation thinks about the money mindset. Kahneman, he changed how we understand decisions. Robbins changed how we talked about avoidance. But here's where each of them stopped. Housel, he writes from observation. Brilliant observations, but observations from a distance. Kahneman, he writes from the lab. Rigorous data, but never the kitchen table at 2 a.m. math. Robbins writes from the stage. Powerful delivery, but she's not the one sitting with you when the inheritance check actually clears and you don't know what to do. None of them sat across the table watching a 58-year-old engineer realize what 20 years of overtime actually cost him was his marriage. None of them held silence after a woman opened her father's life insurance and asked what she was supposed to do now. I did. And what I'm about to share is what happens when you stack the three frames of what they did and their ideas on top of what I've watched personally in the room when these things happen. Because when Kahneman's broken brain math meets Robbins' avoidance behavior, and that's sitting on top of Housel's invisible wealth equation, you get the exact pattern I've watched destroy financially successful people for 2 decades. The pattern isn't in any of those books. It's in the place where all three meet. And that's what this video is about. And here's the piece they couldn't see, because they were never in the room when it landed. Here's the first piece. Kahneman helped build the foundation for what we understand, broken money math. And one concept in behavioral finance helps explain this perfectly. Temporal discounting. In plain language, that means your brain values reward today far more than the same reward sometime in the future. Your brain wasn't built to plan for 30 years from now. It was built to make it to next Friday. So the paycheck on Friday feels more real than what your health cost you at 62. The promotion this year feels more real than the 15 years of evenings you had to trade for it. That's not weakness. That's wiring. But there's something else happening that makes this worse. Your brain is also running what neuroscientists call the reward prediction error. Here's how that works in plain English. Early in your career, you get that first promotion. Your brain predicts it's going to feel amazing. And it does. So your brain learns. Promotions equal a massive reward. But 10 years later, your brain is still predicting that same massive reward. Except now, because you've adapted to the success, the actual reward is much smaller. The euphoria your brain expected, it just didn't show up. What showed up was just mild satisfaction. And the gap between what your brain expected and what actually happened, that gap feels like disappointment. I worked as a managing director, promoted 6 times in 15 years. By the end, he was making more in a quarter than his father had made in a career. And he told me, sitting across from me, that he hadn't felt anything from a promotion in 8 years. He kept chasing them because he didn't know what else to chase. He wasn't broken. His reward system was working exactly the way it was designed to. It was just working against him. That's the reward prediction error. In a chair across from me. Over time, your brain starts to associate achievement with disappointment. That's when success stops feeling good. That's when you're still climbing, but it feels like you're just running in place. And here's where Mel Robbins is right. When the reward stops working, most people don't slow down. They speed up. They chase harder because the only thing the brain knows how to do is reach for the next promotion, the next bonus, the next external signal that things are okay. And that's the avoidance loop. Stuck people don't recognize they're avoiding something. They just keep moving. And that constant motion is what we call money stress. Not the bills, the running. And here's the part nobody in finance will say out loud. Most of the people I sat across from weren't bad with their money. They were running from a feeling. And the spreadsheets were the running shoes. We're going to get to the calculation, I promised you. The math, the people who got out actually ran. But before we do, there's a second piece of the pattern you have to see. Because the math is probably the easy part. The reason most people can't run it is honestly the hard part. The people who broke out of this pattern had something in common that took me years to name. They had stopped outsourcing their confidence about money to external validators. Most people will only trust their financial decisions when the market is up, when the raise comes through, when someone in the room nods and says they made a good call, and they spiral when those signals go quiet. I've worked with high earners, people who by every objective measure were doing well, who were more financially anxious than anyone I knew because their confidence was performance dependent, and the financial anxiety tied to performance never fully goes away. The race just gets faster. You see it in specific behaviors. They stop making reactive decisions based on what their neighbor bought. They also stop that lifestyle creep in its tracks, not because they're cheap, but because the upgrade genuinely doesn't feel worth more than what they already have. They become deeply immune to money shame because they know their own numbers better than anyone else in the room. That's not just psychology. That's a money mindset that's finally working for you instead of against you. That's the wealth mindset built from the inside out. The kind of financial resilience nobody can take from you because nobody gave it to you in the first place. Here's what this looks like in real life. When you start seeing this pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's uncomfortable because you start noticing it in yourself, in your friends, in the people you grew up admiring. Seeing the pattern doesn't break it, but it's where the work begins. And that work starts with the calculation I told you about at the beginning. The math, the people who actually got out and ran. I want to share that with you now, but I have to set it up because most people are emotionally incapable of running this math the first time they try. Here's the math. Most people calculate the cost of leaving a job, the cost of leaving a lifestyle, the cost of leaving a career path that you've spent 20 years building. The math gets done over and over at 2 a.m. at the kitchen table, on a legal pad, on spreadsheets. But almost nobody calculates the cost of staying because staying feels like the default. It's just what we're supposed to do. Staying feels like the safe choice. Staying feels like what responsible adults should do. The clients I watched escape ran a different calculation. They didn't just add up the financial cost of leaving. They added up the total cost of staying, the money cost, plus the time cost, plus the health cost, the presence cost, plus the version of themselves they weren't becoming cost. And when that math was done honestly, the answer was almost always the same. Now, here's why this calculation feels almost impossible for some people to run honestly. Most of us grew up in households where work itself was the proof of a life well lived. 40 years at one company, 40 years of farming, 40 years on a job site, hands that showed the years, backs that paid the price. That wasn't just how our parents and grandparents made a living. It's how they knew they had value, and they earned the right to be proud of it. They built something real on those backs. They deserve every bit of that pride. But the world they built that pride in doesn't exist anymore. The company that promised a pension closed before most of us got there. The trade that built 3 generations of stability got automated or offshored or priced out. The 40-year loyalty exchange that worked for them got broken long before most of us were old enough to vote on it. So when you sit at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. trying to run the cost of staying math, you're not just doing arithmetic. You're trying to honor a generation that earned their pride the hard way, while admitting that the deal they signed, it's no longer a deal that you can sign. That's not betrayal, that's honesty. And honesty is the only place this math actually works. So here's how to run it. This is the math the people who actually escaped the rat race ran. Not the people who quit dramatically, the people who quietly stopped running. You take what you earn in a year, then you write down what your job actually cost you in a year. And I'm not talking, not the commute, not the dry cleaning, the real costs, the sleep you don't get, the workouts you skip, the doctor's appointments you push all around, the conversations with your kids you had to cut short, the version of yourself you're too tired to be by 7 p.m. Most people have never put those numbers on those particular things because they've been taught those things are free. They're not free. They're the most expensive things you can own. You just haven't been billing for them. When you run that math honestly, 2 things happen. 1, the cost of staying becomes a real number instead of a feeling. And 2, you stop being able to pretend the trade is invisible. That's not financial advice. This is what I saw happen across 20 years of real situations. But once you've seen the math done honestly, you can't go back to pretending as if it doesn't exist. If something in this video named what you've been feeling, you're not broken. The pattern is. The system is. The math is real. And the version of you that comes out the other side of running is honestly the version your kids will remember. That's financial clarity, not certainty, clarity. And next time, I'm going to go somewhere I've been thinking about for a long time, because the generation before us measured a good life one way. We were handed a different world, but we kept using the same measuring stick. And nowhere is that more obvious than how we think about credit, debt, and what it actually means to owe somebody money. You don't have to figure this out by yourself.